This is section 154. We're going to take a look at the difference quotient with radicals. So we're going to evaluate radical functions using the difference quotient. Now, as a reminder, the difference quotient, we're going to talk about that a little bit more in calculus, and the objective of it is to cancel out that h. This was the difference quotient. Everything stays the same thing. Now, we're going to talk about a concept in the next slide called the conjugate. Now, the conjugate is if you have any two terms, a and b, one of them is a positive in the middle, the other one is a negative in the middle. So 3 plus square root of 5, 3 minus square root of 5. We call these conjugate pairs. All it means is just the symbol, like these two values are the same. So 3 and root 5, 3 and root 5, they're the same. One has a positive, one has a negative. So if I say multiply by the conjugate, you multiply by the missing pair. So if I said 3 plus root 5 and I said multiply by the conjugate, you're multiplying by the missing pair. So we have our function, it's a square root function, the square root of x plus 2. And so everything I said so far is the same. So I need to find my f of x plus h. And so remember, it's blank. So blank plus 2. What am I plugging in? X plus h. Super easy to simplify. That's just x plus h plus 2. The algebra part's not very complicated. Now plugging it into the difference quotient. So f of x plus h minus f of x all over h. Now the algebra trick to reduce or cancel out this h here is going to be by multiplying both the denominator and the numerator by the conjugate of the numerator. So whatever the conjugate is of this top value here, you're going to multiply the top and bottom by it. So that's the square root of x plus h plus 2 plus the square root of x plus 2. And you're going to do that to the top and the bottom. And so now, when you multiply it out, you're going to see the magic happen. So if I multiply these first two together, you're going to get the square root of x plus h plus 2 squared, because I have two of them. Well, that'll end up canceling out. So that was the first. Then we multiply that, so I get positive square root of x plus 2 times the square root of x plus h plus 2. Multiply these, so minus square root of x plus 2 times square root of x plus h plus 2. And then the last is minus square root of x plus 2 squared. And then again, those square roots, and that's going to cancel out. And then we have a positive and a negative. Those are going to cancel out. So left on top is x plus h plus 2 minus x plus 2. Now the denominator, we don't need to touch. Just leave the denominator alone for now. Now if I distribute that negative, I'm going to change the colors just so you can see it. Save some space. So that becomes a negative, that becomes a negative. So x and negative x cancel out. Positive 2 and negative 2 cancel out. And so now you're left with h over h times the square root of x plus h plus 2 plus the square root of x plus 2. Those h's cancel out, and so I get 1 over the square root of x plus h plus 2 plus the square root of x plus 2. I canceled out my h. I am done. So as a recap, you set it up the same way. You plug it into the difference quotient the same way. To get rid of this h, you have to multiply by the conjugate. So since it's the square root of x plus h plus 2 minus square root of x plus 2, you have the same thing except now it has a plus in the middle, and you multiply the top and bottom by it. Whenever you multiply by the conjugate, these middle two terms will always cancel out. And then for these square root purposes, the square root and the square will cancel out. And so then that's when we were able to simplify further, and then the h's cancel out. And then we were done. Let's look at another one. So let's find the difference quotient. So f of x plus h, that's going to equal x plus h minus 3, right? Plug in those parentheses. So now plugging it into the difference quotient, f of x plus h minus f of x all over h. So now we need to multiply both the numerator and the denominator by the conjugate. Now when you multiply this out, since I have two of them, that's squared, plus square root of x minus 3 times the square root of x plus h minus 3 minus square root of x minus 3 times square root of x plus h minus 3. And then last, minus x minus 3 squared. And that's going to be all over h times the square root of x plus h minus 3 plus the square root of x minus 3. Now remember, you don't multiply anything through on the bottom, you just leave it alone. We got a positive and negative version. The square root and the squares cancel out. The square root and the squares cancel out. So I'm left with x plus h minus 3 minus x minus 3. That negative distributes, so I get negative x and plus 3. I'm just going to say that this is that, just to save us some time. So the x and the negative cancel out. The negative 3 and the positive 3 cancel out. And so I'm left with h over the h's cancel out. And that's my answer. So what did we learn today? We looked at the difference quotient, but with radicals in specific. What do we need to cancel out with the difference quotient? We need to cancel out that h. And then with the radical function, what do we multiply by to eventually get rid of h? We need to multiply by the conjugate to both the numerator and the denominator. This does conclude our lesson. If you have any other questions, please leave them in the comments.